Welcome back, viewers, to part 2 of the 2-part series I've done on the complete rear suspension rebuild on this first generation Honda Pilot. A ton of work has been done to get to this point. I'll put a link in the description of part 1 to make that easy for you to find. I'm also going to put a link to the structural repair that I did to the body on this that I had to do before I could do any of this suspension work. So be sure to check those 2 videos out along with the other videos I'm doing on this Pilot called the Hack Hawk. Anyway, I'm done talking. We'll catch up at the end of the video. I'll see you then. But right now, let's get to part 2, already in progress. Take it away, Eric. With these parts out of the vehicle, I took the opportunity to coat the subframe with rust encapsulator, mostly. I also painted part of it. I also coated the knuckles with some rust encapsulator, and I painted the calipers with just regular black caliper paint. I also put a little bit of paint on the stabilizer bar because, well, rusty parts on all this new black paint would look really out of place. Anyway, we're kind of ready to go back together, but there's one more thing I need to do before I do. Remember this guy? Yeah, the parking brake cable that was damaged. I mean to replace that now. And it does have this really long run up to here, and I'm gonna have to get inside the passenger compartment to access where this goes. So I think job 1 is to loosen it from the body, and I believe it's just 12mm fasteners that hold it in. I'm also going to take out the other side, and I'm going to do, I'm going to scrape off some of this rust and then do a bunch of rust encapsulator in this area to try to prevent any further corrosion. Seems like where those cables terminate is somewhere right up under here, under the carpet, and I can only get the door open this far with it up on the lift. So I'm going to remove this plastic piece here and try to pull the carpet back enough to where I can get access underneath it to the other end of that parking brake cable. Before you pull up on this piece of plastic, know that the little tab for the fuel door can just pull off this way, and that way you avoid breaking that. And you're also likely going to have to remove this front piece as well, which once you pull this molding back, that's pretty straightforward. There you go. So that can pull off this way. And this piece you just pull up on. Hey, check it out, more rust. I forgot there's a little plug on the front of this front cover. As it's sitting there, it goes up in here. You can just pull it out. Sometimes you can unscrew them, but if they don't unscrew, you can just pull this out. I think you can see what I'm dealing with here, which, oh wait, it gets worse. Yep, a bunch of rust. It looks like it's a plate that's held on by a couple of 10mm, and I imagine also further in, but I'm gonna get these 2 10s out and see what I'm looking at underneath. I'm always grateful when they just come out. Thank you. Thank you for only having 3 fasteners. Something tells me the shop vac will be a part of this next part, because that is a lot of rust. Now I have access. I hope I don't need to perform more repairs. There was one more fastener holding it in. Looks like I got some work to do here. I also removed, there's this piece of styrofoam that's wedged up under there. It's not glued down or anything, it's up under here. But here's a better look. Like I said, it's kind of gross, but right there is where the cables come through, and they're held down by a 12 underneath this spring. And then, well, some penetrating oil in here. This pivot looks like it hasn't worked in forever, so see if I can get that working again. I'm also going to get rid of all this rust. I'm going to leave all this stuff out until I get it back down on the ground, but I may wait until I can get this out of here so I can do some proper body work on this floor to prevent further corrosion. Yay, more rust. There were 2 fasteners, they were 12mm fasteners that were holding this center piece down. I'm going to soak this in some penetrating oil and a lot of the rest of this, and I will actually likely address this after I get this down off the lift so I can get into here a lot better. By the way these cables come out, you see how this area on the side is open, like this area over here? So you get this twisted all the way over, and you take the cable and you pull this whole end up through this way. Well, the new parking brake is mostly installed. I wanted to get it up over this hump because, well, there'll be stuff in the way there. I left everything over here disconnected though, because I want to deal with what's going on up there before I assemble all that stuff. But this is out of the way and won't affect me putting together the rear suspension. So let's keep moving on with that. This is the rear differential. You might remember that this seal on this side was leaking. I've gone ahead and cleaned this up. I have 2 new seals. I'll be replacing them on both sides. I'm going to use a seal remover to get the old one out, and to drive the new one in, you can use a socket of about the right size and try to drive it in. I've done that, but it doesn't always end up where I want it to be. Therefore, I prefer to, well, do it the way I'm going to do it, with a brass punch and a hammer. It's out of here. And a new one is going in. Although I do see some gunk in there that I'd love to clean out first. This seal already has lubrication on the inside of it, so I'm not going to lubricate anything in here because they've already taken care of that. But I will very carefully try to install it into its home. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's do the other side. This side doesn't look like it was leaking at all. Before I put the subframe up in here and forget about this harness, I think I'm gonna take care of it now. I'd like to keep pressing forward, and to that end, I'd like to install the subframe. Before I do that, you might remember that the stabilizer bar was bolted to the top of it, and I plan to install that now before I put it up in the vehicle. Because I knew you wouldn't forgive me, I got some new stabilizer bar bushings. These go on the bar where they attach. So I'll be installing these. There's 2 of them. Now these will get a liberal coating of silicone paste on the inside, keep them from getting noisy. It's exciting. Took a while to get to this point. Watch the video I did on fixing that. I put a little oil on these threads, and I previously cleaned these out with a tap. Ones with these little tabs go in the back. It's weird having something in here. It's been out for a couple of weeks now. I'm just gonna snug these up, but I'm gonna torque them to like 80 pound-feet, 80 foot-pounds. I don't know the exact torque, but I think it's somewhere in that neighborhood. Of course, while you're running this up, make sure that nothing is pinched, that the wires are all free. Yeah, what it took to get here, man. What a journey. 80 foot-pounds. You might be curious at how well this worked out. I think it worked out perfectly. The rubber is contacting just the right spot. It's snugged up. It is like it never happened, which was precisely what I was going for. I'd love to reinstall the differential next. Remember this front bolt that broke and I had to put a clamp on it? Well, it's still wedged in this sleeve. I need to get it out. I sometimes forget that I have these, and they are little plastic pieces that I can use on my vise here. In fact, I should use it this way because it's got little grooves for stuff, just like this. I know it's just rusted into place, so maybe it'll break loose when I do this. Or not. That's what was left of it. Blew it out with some compressed air and it seems pretty clean in there now, or as clean as it's going to get. That said, I want to keep it from rusting again because, well, it was pretty substantial. Therefore, I used this inside the frame rails already on the Pilot, and I think this would be perfect for inside of here and maybe a little bit of the outside to help keep the rust from coming back and doing this again. This stuff is designed for things just like this. We'll just let that dry for a bit before we install it. This is the new bolt that I got from Honda, which I coated with the same stuff on the outside to help prevent corrosion. There's the part number for that bolt. Use the handy transmission jack to get the differential back up in there. I blew compressed air inside these threaded holes that hold the back of it in, and I also ran a tap in the front. That way I'm sure the fasteners go in like they should without difficulty. And line everything up. There's two that go in on this side and one that goes in on the other. I just put a little bit of oil in the threads, that's all I did. I always try to be mindful and start things by hand whenever I can, preferably with the right size socket, which in this case would be 19. Well, hopefully I can get this in here. The jack's in the way. And all I did was put a little bit of oil in those threads. I figured between the paint that I did and everything else, it should be okay. I don't anticipate this coming out again anytime soon. I'll admit that I'm not entirely sure what the torque spec is for these. If I were to guess, I would put it somewhere, once again, in the 80 foot-pound range, 60 to 80. This one I would put somewhere in the neighborhood of 35 to 40 foot-pounds. It's amazing that just those 4 fasteners hold all that in. Not quite done yet, because there is the vent tube, which goes up top here. I can sort of feel my way around, I know where it goes. There's a little clip, and then there's a couple of electrical connections that also need to find a home. Just 2 connections for this. But there's also clips that the connectors and everything go on to. This helps keep everything nice and tidy. I mean, this is a suspension, stuff moves around. I mean, not a whole lot up here, but still, I want things tightened up. I want it right. I almost forgot. I was going to reboot these axles and paint these axle shafts, which I'm going to do now. I've covered this in other videos, so I don't think it really needs to be covered in detail. The only thing of note is it appears that the left side axle is shorter than the right side axle. So this is the left and this is the right. So keep that in mind if you're going this far into your disassembly. I believe the time has come. I have everything complete and ready to reassemble. I just finished reconditioning the axles. In other words, I took them apart, painted them, put new boots on them, put new grease in them, put new clamps. So like those are all reconditioned. I also took some time to scrape off the rust on the coil springs, hit it with some prep spray, cleaned it off, and then I painted it with some of that Eastwood chassis black, both of those. So really, it's just a matter of getting all this stuff back up in there and together. Oh yeah, I got some new parts too. Reassembly is going to begin with this knuckle. I'm going to start with the right side. I got new control arms. Here's the part number for the right side here. These bushings on the old ones were, well, they weren't looking all that great, and I figured everything else is new. Might as well drop I think these were another couple $100, but anyway, by the time I'm done, this suspension will be pretty much like new. Before I install this, remember our ABS wire, sort of wrapped around back here. I'll put just a tiny bit of anti-seize on these in case I ever need to come back. I was grateful these came out, but let's make sure that they come out again in the future if I need them to. I think this will only go on one way. And it looks like that's it. And I'm pretty sure that this one's the right side. Yeah, there's an R stamped right there. Now with this one, I'm gonna put a little bit of regular strength Loctite on these bolts. There wasn't any on here originally, but these are suspension parts. I want them to stay put. Don't need any of this coming loose. I think the torque on these is somewhere around 50 foot-pounds. I don't know for sure, if I'm honest. All right, guys, ready to go back in. I'm gonna start off with these front lower control arms. And yep, I got new ones. I didn't like the way the bushings looked on the old ones. This is the part number. They're the same on both sides. So you'll need 2 of these. I believe this guy's the same on both ends, so I don't think it really matters what end goes in first. And yes, of course, for good measure, the anti-seize. This is one of those things, in fact, a lot of this is not being tightened until it's on the ground. Sorry, I just forgot them. Get this guy now. I've gone with aftermarket parts for these upper control arms, and these are adjustable upper control arms, unlike what was on there before. With these, I'll be able to make some camber adjustments, but I'm gonna take them over to the bench and make sure that it's the same length as the one I took off first, lock it down, and then I'll install it. I'm looking at this plastic piece and I'm thinking, man, that's gotta be the worst ball joint boot I think I've ever seen. And then I took it off and realized, well, it's just a cover. Okay. I wonder if I'm gonna be able to use the original castellated nuts, because I like that setup better. Let's see. Oh yes. I like this setup better. Not that this is bad and it won't work, but these cotter pins, you don't have to bend over or anything. These guys go in and they hook. They're like a one-time use. Now I need to make sure that it goes through here. Oh yeah, we're good. That seems pretty close. At least these I can adjust and get them where I want them. I won't talk about what happened in the past. I will obviously snug these up once I've got them, once I've got it on the vehicle. Yep, it got the anti-seize. Now the axle. And now the super fun part of trying to lift this piece up in here, this next large cumbersome piece up in here, and get at least a couple of these guys attached. Soak this axle end with some WD-40. It's a rust inhibitor. It's really good at that. Keeping this nut at the ready. And I also have the 2 fasteners for the front part of it to go in as well. So fingers crossed. I'm just putting the anti-seize on the shank, not the threads. Feels like we're in the clear now. I kind of feel like I can bolt those down. It's just a bushing up there. I might want to put the coil spring in this end first. And I think I'm going to leave these fasteners loose when I do that. And that way everything will be all together at the same time. But wow, boom. It's like suddenly rear suspension. This is the part number for the cam bolt kit, which will need 2 of these, 1 for each side. And this is what the coil spring sits up into, and these are the same on both sides as well. All right, I was mistaken a moment ago. This contains bolts for both sides. And I know I'm gonna need another one of these at some point in the future, and I think these also work on Odysseys and a lot of these, but I'm not sad about having 2 of these, but you only need 1 of these for both sides. Now this one, extra, extra, extra anti-seize. Like as much as you can possibly get on there, because this is the problem child. It seems like every other bolt under here has provisions like this one for instance. So if you look at this bolt and the shank on it, you can see that it's got those ridges. And those ridges help it from making contact with the inside of the bushing and rusting out like this guy does, which has no ridges at all. And this is the one that you need to use for the adjustment for the alignment. The one bolt that should have that. The one bolt that needs to move after long periods of time has no provisions to keep it moving for a long period of time. That seems silly. You know, come to think of it, I also could have painted this with some of that internal frame paint, or just painted it with something so that it had a coating on it. And when you put this in, this is a cam bolt. So see how it's got sort of an ellipse there? Well, when you put the washer on the other side, make sure the washer is facing in the same direction so that when you do the adjustment, it's not doing this, that they're both moving together. That's what you want. And the bolt goes in through the back, I believe. My eccentric. So I'm just getting this close, not tightening it all the way. And you can sort of see what happens when you're making the adjustment when I move this. See how it pushes the control arm in or out, depending upon where this eccentric is. That's how that whole thing works. I think I'll put the shock in there before, or the damper in there before I put the coil spring in. That way I don't have to fight past the coil spring. There is no left and right for the dampers, so you need two of these, one for each side. The dampers are directional though. You see this padding that's on one side and it's not on the other? There's that part number again. The padding faces towards the front. It's to protect it against debris and that kind of thing from hitting it. So when you install these, make sure the padding faces forward. Not that it needs it, but because this is one of those mounting points that I said is sort of set up so that it doesn't corrode inside a bushing, but I'm not taking any chances here. Before installing dampers or struts of any kind, I first like to cycle them a couple of times first. So I'll just compress them till they bottom out. And then I'll let them extend out again. And I'll do this a couple of times. I want to make sure that the oil is circulated through it. Sometimes there might be a little bit, a cavity of air or something in there, and it'll make a heck of a noise if you don't do this. I usually find it more on aftermarket struts than I do on original equipment ones, but why not just not take a chance? And this also, if I can press it down like this, it'll make it easier to install. That worked nice. This is one of those fasteners that I'm going to tighten on the ground. Same with this lower one. I think we're ready for a coil spring. All right, I'll let you in on a little secret. I switch sides with the coil springs. Over time, the driver's side in particular will sag because that's where the weight is mostly. I've got camber adjustments and everything back here anyway, so I figure I'm going to do the same in the front as well. But I'm going to take the side that gets most of the wear and move it to this side, because I didn't buy these springs because if I did, it would have been $500 for both of them. It just didn't seem necessary since they weren't broken. I tried to get these, but I guess I didn't order them. But these are the lower seats, so these go on the bottom part. I showed you the part number for the top ones, which I have a new one of those here. And if nothing else, this should help keep things quiet up top. Oh, and I have already liberally coated the through bolt with anti-seize. This guy on the top does have a notch right there that's got to match up with the spring like that. So notch, top of spring. And then inside the pocket here, there's a notch for this to fit into also. I realize that not everyone has a lift to work off of. Therefore, anytime you see me use the screw jack, you can substitute a floor jack and it would do the exact same thing. So I want to double check and make sure that I've got the right lower control arm. So let me go grab the other one. Here's the correct part number for the right side. Let's try this again. 2 clues. One clue is that these threaded pieces, the threaded holes are in the back because they're for the ABS sensor wire. Also, the stabilizer link connection is in the rear. So make sure of that before you install it. And this would be the right side, but on either side, you want to make sure that these threaded holes for the ABS sensor wire are facing the back of the vehicle. All right, let's try this again. I'm glad they designed that bolt to be like self-centering, because otherwise, ugh. All right, except for the stabilizer bar and snugging everything up, which I'm gonna wait and do the stabilizer bar so I can do both sides at the same time, because lifting this up and down, trying to work against the stabilizer bar is not cool. So if you can, and you're doing this, disconnect the stabilizer bar no matter what. That will help you, well, get things into place. I'm actually going to go up and tighten those fasteners that go to the body on the front of that lower control arm, or that front control arm, and then we'll move over to the other side. Before I forget, I'm also going to take the opportunity to tighten this upper ball joint. Awesome. Love those cotter pins. Might as well take care of this axle nut too. The CV boot kit came with a new axle nut for each side. I'm using them. Here's the part number for the left side front control arm. Yeah, I mean it. This is actually that part. I'm not going to go step by step on this side as much like I did on the other side because, well, I covered it over there. It's pretty much the same thing over here. Way to scare the crap out of me. Not happy. Well, I was almost there. I don't know if you can see that weird bulge in the CV boot. But one of the things I do is I rotate everything once it's all together to make sure that it's working correctly. And I noticed it binding up. And it looks like something's going on with that inner CV joint that I need to address. Which means it's all got to come back out again. So I'm going to take a break and I'll come back and do that. I removed this problem axle. Now let's open it up, find out what's going on with this joint. Hopefully it'll only cost me another CV boot clamp. So one of these cups fell out. Seems to be the issue. It probably happened as things were moving around. So all I'm gonna need is a CV boot clamp and we'll be good. If I would have let this go and I didn't check for this before I got to this point and I started it up and I went to move it, this would totally destroy this joint. And I'd have to replace, at the very least, this joint and quite possibly the entire axle. The warning here is to be careful when you're putting those components in. They are rather cumbersome and hard to deal with, but be sure you don't pull the inner CV joint apart because that could happen. Just gonna reinstall the bearing. All right, I was able to find a clamp. It's a different type of clamp. I've got this cranked down to its smallest possible size. Looks like that worked. I feel like I finally made some progress here. Couple of tips. One is if you're trying to locate this and get this bolt lined up, if it's too far out or in, Something that you might consider is actually moving this adjuster, which is what I did. It was too far out, so I basically turned it in so that it would pull the control arm back a little bit, and it did just enough for me to get this bolt in. Another thing that you probably saw was when I was trying to position the coil spring. I found that when I was pushing this up, it seemed to want to go out like this. So I took that pair of vice grips and clipped it to the top of the spring while I raised the lower control arm until I got everything in position, and then I took the vice grips off. That seemed to help, and it seems to be, at least where this spring mount is, seems to be in a good location. So I was very happy with how that turned out. Now I feel like I can start putting the rest of this back together, which will include remounting the ABS sensor wire, doing the stabilizer links. I'll probably do that right now, remounting the brakes and doing all that stuff. Then we can set it on the ground and tighten everything up. Here's the part number for the stabilizer links. They're both the same number. I don't think there's a top and a bottom to this. Reusing the old fasteners. I ran a thread chaser through them though. Hook up the other side before I tighten it all down. These aren't something that needs to be tightened on the ground. Think of anything with a bushing like what this is that could be bound up. If you tighten it when it's down like this, then when you compress it and it's down on the ground, the bushing is sort of in a bind. Whereas if you tighten things when they're on the ground, the bushing is in a neutral position and can articulate with the suspension as opposed to being biased to one side. I'm super tired of dealing with these ABS sensor wires. I keep hitting them with my head and bumping into them. It's just super annoying. These are the fasteners that I saved out of the old control arms. Put a little anti-seize on them. They came out okay, but I just want to be sure that if I ever have to replace an ABS sensor, that these will come out without much difficulty. Keeping these where I left them, or where they came out of, is making reassembly so much easier. And these had clips up above here. Looks like this one's also got another fastener that I forgot. I think we can get the parking brake cables through the backing plates. Start on this side with the nice shiny new one. Of course, you never know. So I believe this has got to go through here and then through the backing plate. Like that. So hopefully nobody will mess with this thing and it won't get caught up in this bushing. Which is what happened last time, which is why I replaced this cable. Of course, it doesn't look like anybody ever used the parking brake because of the crusty rust that I found inside the driver's compartment, but nah, well, you get the idea. So as long as this stays like this, instead of getting wrapped up like that, we're good. And these go in a lot easier than they come out. Just push it through till it clicks. It's okay, Light. I wasn't using you anyway. Get these brakes back together. I just pulled on the cable to tighten it up so that it wouldn't fall off of here. I already went through and cleaned the mounting bosses, or where the brake shoes come in contact with the backing plate. And now some anti-seize to make sure things move and to help keep the corrosion away. I'm a parking brake guy. Also, I used to have a Pennsylvania State inspector's license, and you would fail vehicles that didn't have a working parking brake. Something very few people use, especially on an automatic transmission. And I don't know, I like using mine. Make sure the adjuster moves, and this one moves fine, so I'm not gonna put anything on it. Now, those of you that have seen me do brake jobs know that what I normally do in this situation is I clean the rotor off because there's rust inhibitor that it's coated with before installing it. Given that this vehicle is not done yet, it's going to be sitting outside for a while, I kind of want to keep that, so I'm just going to leave it on there. Some of you may have noticed that I didn't reconnect the drive shaft, and I did that on purpose so that I'd be able to perform this brake adjustment unencumbered. If I left the drive shaft connected, it's in park, and I may not be able to turn the wheel like I want to in order to check and do this brake adjustment here. If the drive shaft is still connected and you want to do this adjustment, you could always put the transmission in neutral and it will also move freely. And these screws will help keep the rotor in place so I can do this adjustment. If it's off to one side or the other, it can cause an issue. Also, I'll be able to tell if there are any noises from the splash shield when I rotate it, which can sometimes happen when you do a lot of suspension work like this. This gets bent or moved, and when it does, it comes into contact with the rotor and you get a noise, and it's kind of annoying. To avoid that, do what I'm doing. I wouldn't be able to do this if the drive shaft was connected. Right now, I just hear brake shoe contact, which is fine. All right, it's locked up. Now I just loosen it until it's not. Feels good. I'm going to pull on the parking brake cable to try and center the shoes, readjust, and I'll call it done. A little bit of silicone spray helps us go in easier. All right, let's get these brakes sorted. I didn't do an awesome job on cleaning and painting these calipers. I don't feel bad about it. Rotating this and checking this stuff is paramount to making sure you don't have noises after doing work like this, because I can't stress enough how backing plates get bent, rust falls out, or maybe a chunk of rust comes loose and now is coming in contact with a rotor and it wasn't before. This is where you'll find the noises. I put anti-seize on the pad ends so that the pads move freely. And the tab goes on the leading edge. The rotor rotates this way, leading edge is down here. You can put them the other way, but this is the way the factory does it. And I like to do it the way the factory does it. I've already gone in and removed these two fasteners that go to this bracket so that I can just put it back in there. This is some of that internal frame coating. Gonna do the other side, but you're not getting detail. Sorry, just had to bleed the brakes. I'll put the wheels back on, put it on the ground, and tighten everything up. But we are looking at the end of this project. I've removed the thing that was holding the brake pedal down, keeping the brake fluid from leaking out. And now I've got my fluid extractor out. I've never used this to bleed brakes before, but I'm gonna do all four wheels and just flush the entire system. So I'm gonna start back here and, well, see how this works out. I really like this tool. I'll link it in the description. That was by far the easiest one-man brake bleeding job I have ever done. And the brake pedal feels awesome. I'm not able to turn the engine on yet, but hey, feels great. And like I said, easy. Link in the description if you want it. Before I put the wheels on, there were a couple of things I needed to do. And one of those things, the bolt that holds the front of the differential in goes up into the subframe. And as such, the moisture and all that stuff can get in there and wick down through the threads of it. And I think that's what caused its demise. So to try to prevent that, as you know, I painted the bolt with some of that rust encapsulating frame coating stuff. But I also put some Loctite on the threads and ran it back up in there. And what that will do, it will actually seal up those threads and prevent moisture from going down in there, and hopefully will prevent an issue in the future. I also had to reconnect the drive shaft, but I'm standing here now because there's something super important that I need to do before putting this back together, and that's fill the differential back up. VTM4 fluid only in this differential. I'll say it one more time. VTM fluid only for this differential. It was specifically designed for this differential. You got to use that fluid. You get it from Honda or Acura or wherever. Anyway, I'm going to install it now with the tool that Honda gave me or Acura gave me at the time, which has gotten kind of old because, well, you know, it's been a while. Yeah, forgetting to put fluid in this would be bad. Sometimes you'll hear a noise from this on turns, and if you do change the fluid with VTM4 fluid, what kind of fluid? Yes, that's right, VTM4 fluid, very good. And that very likely will solve the problem. In fact, any of the problems that I ran into with this differential usually involved incorrect fluid, hence the reason I'm making such a big deal of it anyway. This is what Acura gave me to install this fluid with. I don't have a part number for it. Like I said, this came from my parts department way back in the day. Let's see if it still works. And it does. And I made sure it was clean. You just keep filling it until it comes out. Once it comes out, put the fill plug back in, tighten it down. If you want to get it happy, put a new crush washer on it. Don't over torque it so that the crush washer gets completely deformed, and you should be good to go. I think all you'll need of this is 1 gallon. I don't think you'll need more than that. Looks like we're there. Like I said, you don't need to super torque it, just snug it up. You should be good. It's exciting that the wheels are going back on, albeit temporarily. I'm gonna wrap this video up, but then after I get everything torqued down, I will put the bumper back on and finish that video, which when it's available, I'll link it in the description for you. That was all part of this adventure. And I'm not torquing these down yet because I know these are coming off again, but I will torque them to 80 foot-pounds for final torque. It's weird seeing it on the ground again. It's been a while. Before I torque everything down, I'm gonna start it up, move it forward a little bit, move it backward a little bit, and that is to get the suspension centered up. After it's been up in the air for a while like that, you might notice this rear wheel is cambered in a little bit. That might change after it goes forward and back, and then my torquing will be more accurate, let's put it that way. Looks kind of cool with no back bumper. Oh yeah, I forgot, no exhaust. Oh no, I think someone stole my catalytic converter. That's exactly what you'll hear. See how the wheels sit different after driving it, just forward and backward? I'm gonna try to remember everything I need to tighten. Wow, this is a lot nicer without a bumper. I am snugging these up with an impact. If I can find it, I'll post a link to the torque specs in the description, but I'm cool with what I'm doing here. I guarantee you that's what my alignment guy is gonna do. I think that's all of them. To say this was an epic amount of work, kind of an understatement. I mean, the complete rear suspension has been renewed. The rear differential has been resealed. The axles have been rebooted and relubricated. All this stuff. Just everything back here. And not to mention the structural repair that I did so that I could even bolt this suspension back up to this thing. This Pilot was pretty much condemned before I got it. But now, well, I'm bringing it back and I'm hoping the information in these videos is useful to you. Now, the Pilot is not road legal at this time, but I did take it out in the parking lot and I drove it around just to listen to how things were back there, see if I could hear any rattles or all that. Wasn't really able to get it up to speed, but you know, as you can see, the suspension is all working good. I didn't hear any abnormal noises, any abnormal things coming from the differential, but I was driving on gravel, granted. Once it's road legal, I'll take it out and drive it some more, but the front suspension is still pretty much trashed, and I definitely feel that when I'm driving, so it's hard to isolate the rear suspension and how awesome that is now. But anyway, I hope the information that I provided with you in this video or these videos was entertaining and informative and gave you some insight into what you're looking at if you're rebuilding the rear suspension on a Honda SUV, let's call it, because this works for MDXs and Ridgelines as well as Honda Pilots of about the same vintage. It didn't change all that much over the years, but definitely watch out for that rust back there. There's a video to that linked down in the description, like I said, along with parts, tools, additional information, all down in the description, including a link to EricTheCarGuy.com, which is a great resource if you have automotive questions that I put together for you. Aside from that, thank you so much for watching today. Be safe, have fun, stay dirty. I hope to see you next time. By the way, I post videos on Fridays, so be sure to stop back and check it out. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.